I'm Suzanne, and I am the Herbcraft and Potions Mistress for the Morgan Le Fay Mystery School by Rockstar Priestess. I'm here to talk a little bit about Herbcraft and Avalon and how those two fit together. I also am a certified herbalist, and I've been a devotee of Morgan Le Fay probably since 2002. I'm also the owner of Alchemy of Avalon Tea and Herb Company. And I have my notes here because I have a lot to talk about, so excuse my notebook. But yeah, so I wanted to talk about the Avalonian Herbcraft path. And even though I chose sort of an Avalonian witchy path back in 2002, I wouldn't say that I aligned with the healer side of this path until much later, probably around 2009. Now, all witchcraft, of course, involves healing on some level, but most of you probably know that Avalon, or being a priestess of Avalon, has a particularly strong resonance with the archetype or the role of the healer. One of the first things that we learn about Avalon is that King Arthur is taken there after the Battle of Camelot to have his wounds attended to be healed, to cross over, and then ultimately cross over to the other world and be reborn. We also read of healing powers still to this day that come from the springs, the red and white springs of Avalon, and the healing powers of the Lady of the Lake herself. So of course my favorite part, though, is the idea of, or reading about the possibility of Avalon as a great mystery school. Avalon as a place where women came to study the ways of the priestess, to devote years, if not decades, of their lives to attuning to the earth and the seasons, and to embodying the divine feminine and celebrating her many faces in ritual and in ceremony and magic, to read the stars, to develop the sight, an inner knowing and intuition, divination, to tell of history and legend in stories and songs, but of course, to act as midwives and as healers, and to gain deep knowledge of the plants around them, gathering them, preparing medicines, treating one another and members of the outer community with these medicines, amongst other things. Aside from the obvious mundane reasons for their practice, like people get sick, they need medicine, I also believe that Herbcraft and healing were a key part of Avalonian life because it's a way to directly attune to and experience the life cycle of the world around you, and thus to experience the goddess herself. As far as Herbcraft in general, I noticed actually as I was writing this that Debbie and I seem to use the word Herbcraft versus herbalism or herbal magic because, and I love that because I feel that the word embodies both sides, both the medicinal and the magical side. There are massive medical herbalism textbooks on my shelves that I used during my training while getting certified, and that I continue to use when I'm treating clients for various ailments. And then at the same time, all herbs have magical properties. Things that can be used in spellcraft, using them in rituals to honor the moon or the turning of the wheel of the year. You can use herbs to make an offering to a specific deity or to the fae folk, which is one thing that I like to do. You can use the herbs to create an incense for a specific purpose or for a Sabbath. You can use them in anointing oil blends, to just give a few of the many examples. Now, although many esteemed herbalists stick primarily to the medical side of herbalism, often for good reasons. I won't get into those now, but many witchy herbal books only cover the magical side. So you get, sort of the Scott Cunningham classic magical herbalism, or you get the big medical textbook that you can find, online or in Barnes & Noble or something. So I, for one, struggled for years trying to keep them separate. If I talk about the magical side too much, then, the medicinal herbalist clients won't trust me. if I talk about the medical side of it amongst a circle of witches or priestesses, then they won't think that I have an intuitive magical relationship with the plants. Weird things like that. So after years of struggling to keep these two things kind of separated and kind of straying from the Avalonian path, I finally truly realized that Avalon did not demand this of me. An Avalonian priestess can embrace all of this, even when the Muggle world tries to put us into one convenient box. And as a devotee of Morgan Le Fay, I kind of realized I could wear as many faces as she does. So what do? So I, personally, after completing my training, I kind of just dove in and began creating products for my website and for other local businesses. So my main focus kind of was and is on medicine making, right? Creating teas, tinctures, salves, balms, oil infusions, tinctures, syrups, etc. But they're primarily inspired by Avalon or by magic and witchcraft and goddess spirituality, or even pop culture and history. I like to keep it fun as well. I've also studied aromatherapy, so I often create remedies with essential oils as well. And I use herbs in my spells. I leave them as offerings for the Fae, like I said earlier. I leave them on my altar. I have a specific sort of Morgana Avalonian altar in another room of the house where I'll put maybe whatever herb that we're working on based on the season. I also sometimes work with Hecate, so I use herbs for that working as well. I've also recently started using herbal yoni steams ceremoniously to honor my womb, my sexuality. I find that is also a huge cornerstone of a goddess path. And I also really love to make incenses, like I said. I also like to do witchy cooking using herbs with my chef husband. So that's another really fun way to use it if you want to get into the kitchen witch side of things. But coming back around to Avalon, if you want to get into a more specific herbcraft practice centered around Avalon, what you're going to want to do is think about plants that are and were, like 2,000 years ago or so, native to the UK. And there are lots, oh my God, there are so many, and they're wonderful. The UK is just rife with wonderful plant medicine. So the first few that kind of come to mind for me are those that come from some of the trees there. So you've got like the elder, the linden, and the hawthorn. Elderflower and elderberry are some very widely, commonly used, I say herbs, but of course you have the berries as well, being the most, one of the most well-known medicines for coughs and colds and flu season. So I think they're just starting to come into fruition right now. I live in the Phoenix, Arizona area, so I unfortunately don't get to watch all of these cycles happening, but I believe the elderberries do come in the late summer and early fall in England. So if you're over there, now would be a good time to maybe go out and harvest some. So elder is wonderful, linden flower, linden being a calming nervine, which is a sort of herbalist term for a plant that targets the central nervous system. And then you've got hawthorn, and please, of course, everything that I'm saying now is very generalized. Definitely do some more research if you plan to use these plants medicinally. But for example, hawthorn has been used for centuries as a heart tonic. So both the leaves and the berries can be used for this, and this is a plant that's very prevalent in the Glastonbury area. Then of course you've got like mugwort and motherwort. Mugwort is like one of the witchiest of all plants, right? They even mention it in Practical Magic, but it's a wonderful plant for many, many things. Both mugwort and motherwort would be herbal allies for female health, probably alongside red raspberry leaf. really good uterine tonic. Then you've also got plants like dandelion or plantain or nettles. Many people would just consider those weeds and they wouldn't give them a second look, or maybe they just want to get the pesticides and try to kill all of them. But please don't do that if you have some growing in your house. They're wonderful, nourishing and detoxifying kind of medicinal and edible plants in most cases. So yeah, don't waste those. They're lovely. Then you've also got vervain and lemon balm and rosemary, very common over there. Lemon balm's another very calming plant, often used for mild anxiety. Vervain has a lot of history with magical use from the time of the Druids. Rosemary does as well. So definitely do a little bit of research on the folkloric history behind these plants as well. Lavender is one of the first plants that comes to mind when people think about England. Thousands of years ago, it wasn't native to the UK, but it did become naturalized during and after the time of the Roman invasion, so the very, very early ADs. So we can surmise that Avalon was a few hundred years after that, perhaps, or right around the same time. So they would have had access to lavender, and of course now we know that it is naturalized in the UK. And that's just a few. So that's a good place to start if you want to start working with some Avalonian plants. Some good resources to try to gain some further study as far as the folkloric side. There's a book that just recently was released by Gina Tillendrew, who runs Sisterhood of Avalon, and that's the Mythic Moons of Avalon. It's a blue book, really pretty cover art. It goes into her 13 Avalonian herbs that she uses. And then a fantastic UK herbalist would be Anne McIntyre. So if you can find any of her books, they're all wonderful. And then a good place to start if you just want to begin a general herbalism practice, either just for yourself and your family, or just to have some sort of background medicinal knowledge, I highly recommend Rosemary Gladstar for beginners. She's highly respected in the herbalist field, but she's also very accessible to beginners. So, but the main thing that I want all of you to remember before I say goodbye is don't be intimidated. It took me a long time to call myself a healer, to really claim myself as an herbalist, and I think that I had, a very stereotypical image in my mind of what a healer should be and look like and act like. So if you feel that you don't fit in there, don't worry about it. Go out, empower yourself, have fun with it, and find me if you have any questions. Thank you so much.